Hey guys, Andy again, Spoken Label, back in the house here on a Sunday evening. It's been lovely today. It's been a beautiful, beautiful day. Me and Amanda went up to the Shipley Woods at the back of us today, so that's why we're quite late today. And I've got suntan as well. We took our friend Jane over and her 2.5-year-old little daughter Neve, and what should have took us probably an hour took about three. When you're trying to navigate a 2.5-year-old that just wants to soak you with a water pistol for 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours on the woods, yeah, you've got a problem. So. But anyway, listen, mate, onwards and upwards. We've got a dear friend of me today. Now, I met this gentleman, John Clifford, today. John, I met you through April Madison, a writing group, didn't I? Was that
Yes, indeed.
18 months ago, 2 years ago, was it?
Something like that, yeah. It all kind of fogs in time, but yeah, it was
Yeah.
originally through that writing group, wasn't it?
Yeah, that wonderful little writing group she had.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's still active, John. April, if it is, I do apologise, but I know it certainly is or was at the Colton Club, and it's great fun. So I
Yes.
don't know. No.
I believe it's still, yeah, it's still kicking on, but I think it's kind of I think it's one of those where it's like it's always been a bit more of a like kind of supportive community in a way than a very, very formal like writing group. And so it
Yeah.
kind of like we jump in and out of it at times, but
Yeah, no, I get it completely of it. So I'll have to go back down there sometime and give a shout, but it's just
mm,
time. It's always say
yeah.
time anyway. Time is our enemy. So, but anyway, we're going to chat about John's work today. Now, people might notice John's accent. It's not a very Mancunian accent, despite the fact you've been up here for about 12 years now, haven't you? Then really, so
I have. Well, I've been up since 2013, actually. So it's been a good solid 12 years. It's so funny that you say that because I absolutely agree with you. But anytime I go back down south, people will say to me that I sound a little bit mank, which just means I feel like I've hit some kind of weird Venn diagram in between. It's very odd.
yeah. Do you find, obviously, if people wondering if I know you're from Northwest London,
Mm.
do you find if you go back down there for a while, do you come back up and realise your accent has changed a little bit?
A little bit. I think it's like it's less kind of like the environment you're in. I think it's the people that you're around. It's like anytime that I go and I'm chatting to like friends of mine from kind of school or whatever, I'll drop back into whatever the kind of slang was in our kind of cadence from when we were at school. And it's the same way I always think about the fact that like the first manager I had in like a proper kind of like office, like what I call an office job, was this guy from Wigan. And so as I was learning how to like speak with like business English, it always had a like I think a little bit of a Wiganism to it, which was just obviously extremely weird for a lad from North London, this little
Oh yeah.
intern, to be chatting
Oh
like that.
wow, yeah, completely. You find it's worth people knowing, obviously, if you go down to an area for a while. We have one of our friends at Spoken Label is a young lady called Quickly. And
Mm,
I will know you will know Quickly because she's had a book out on the same label you've at will come into shortly. And I've had her on there twice. And
mm,
the second time she'd been over to Ireland for about a week and a half, and she comes back with a straight, pure Southern Irish accent. It was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and it's not a normal accent, so it shows you sometimes how it impacts you sometimes.
I'm a proper little sponge and a proper mimic for people's voices, and it was to the absolute annoyance of my sisters at points when like we were growing up because we were exactly the same. Like all of my family's from the southwest of Ireland. We would go over and I mean, to my mind, it was almost like a thing of affection where I was mimicking people's accents. I'm sure to everyone it just sounded like this annoying little English kid trying to do an Irish accent. But I remember specifically at one point we were getting the plane back and I was chatting some rubbish and my sister just turns to me in the kindest way she could was like, please, can you stop with that accent?
Oh, fantastic, mate. Fantastic. Obviously, now, in relation to your creativity in itself, I know you told me a little bit before we got recording today, but you started as a traditional writer when you were younger, didn't you? Then obviously things
Mm,
fell by the wayside for a little bit.
mm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I started writing, I think, first in the way that probably a lot of people do, being like a young teenager and going through like all of the stuff with like kind of teenage adolescence and being like, I have feelings and I need to write them down and all of this. And so like would write a lot of poetry through that. And even yeah, I had like a little DeviantArt account back in the day that I used to post poems on and all this kind of stuff.
Oh,
But
deviant art. Oh, good God.
I know. I
Wow.
know. Isn't that a blast from the past? But so did that and then kind of went off to uni, didn't really kind of delve into it. My degree was not in kind of creative writing. I did a history degree at the University of Manchester. And then basically after that, a few years after that, went into a writing group that was based up in chapter one at the recommendation of a friend. And through that, kind of found this community of writers who were all wonderful and sharing with each other. And a few of them were kind of like going off to open mics and stuff like that. And so that was my first experience of kind of the poetry performance scene in Manchester. And I kind of loved it. And so I just delved into it.
I think you do today, like I started it a few years before you because I did my degree in creative writing at Bolton some years back now,
Mm,
and I drifted for a few years from creativity after it finished. Then I ended up joining a
mm.
writing workshop in Bolton, very similar pattern to you, and a few people I knew there were going to all these open mics, and it snowballs, doesn't it? I think really, before you know it, sometimes it can take over
Mm.
your life if you're not careful.
I compare it to, I really think that, and I think there's probably a strong one for a lot of performers and a lot of poets in around the scene that I know at least, is that I've heard stand-up comedians talk about like how they often got started out because they would see other people doing stand-up and be like, I want an excuse to get to talk to those people, like I want to get to be part of that club, and so you start doing it yourself. And there was something I remember, like the writing group itself was like a beautiful community, but there was something of going what was the name of the event? Was it In Other Words? There was this event that came over from Leeds years and years ago to Manchester. They did events in Gulliver's pub up in Northern Quarter. And I remember going to that and seeing some of the people that performed there. And you know, when you're just like, oh, this is like opening a part of my brain that I didn't even know existed. It's
Yeah.
like, and that was the start of it all. It was incredible.
Yeah, I did it. I did a few like that. Now I'm not going to name the names I'm on about, but you're right. Yeah, you do. Sometimes it opens up a rush, and certainly before you know it, you're
Mm,
going coming home from coming home and writing 3 or 4 poems a night. Before you know it, it's explosions in you. So no, yeah, I understand you completely with that.
yeah.
Now, obviously, people will look at the history at the moment yourself. You've recently just headlined Verbose, haven't you, as well? Which is obviously one of the, apart from Speakeasy, one of Manchester's probably most busiest events, actually. Stick for Speakeasy there. But yeah, how
I
did
did
you,
indeed, yeah.
yeah, how did that experience go then with Verbose?
It was beautiful. It was a really, really lovely time. I really adore Verbose. Verbose was one of the kind of early nights that I found in Manchester, and it's kind of one of the, like, say, along with Speakeasy itself, it's one of probably the longer running runs that they only, I think, back in January had their kind of 10-year anniversary of it, which was wonderful. But yeah, so it was really nice to get to go back there and do a headline alongside Pinky May, who's an incredible
Yeah. I've
poet and
not met
creative.
Pinky yet, but I will be, to be honest, because I've read enough of
Mm,
her stuff online, seen a few bits pieces.
yeah,
I will want to get
no,
her on
she,
here, but that's for the future, to be honest with you. But yeah, good point.
yeah. But no, it was wonderful. It's like I love a headline slot because, like, you get with Verbose, it was what, it was about 20 minutes, and you kind of just get to properly kind of, you, if you're doing an open mic, it's like you need to go and be impactful and do your big piece or like a couple of pieces that'll like really hit home. And having like the luxury of more time means you get to be like, well, here's one side of my art, here's one side of my practice, here's another, here's all of this. So like, yeah, it was a really beautiful experience.
Cool. Now, obviously, we can't give much away yet, can we? Because obviously, like for a few reasons, it's way too long-winded to hear. But we need to. How should we put this, John? Then should we tell people to keep your eyes on for the boss's social media posts?
Absolutely.
That exciting news. Oh, that's putting it subtly there, right?
Yes, keep an eye on the socials. There's news coming up, and yeah, absolutely wonderful stuff ahead. I'm excited. I'm excited for things in the coming year.
Yeah, we'll just leave that there. But yeah, no, fair play to them. I love the team, all the people involved with it. 'Cause I've known most of the people there over the years, and everyone's been fantastic. To honest, just straight away.
Mm,
But I've had a good few of the crew on there, in various ways or another, on Spoken Label. And I look forward to bringing more people on straight away in the time to come. So
mm.
obviously, you've been telling me obviously about before, and I'm going to let you pick up the ones that you want to talk about. I know you've done quite a few big events, haven't you, over the past year or so? And this will give people having an idea how far you've been traveling and your versatility. So, do you want to tell us about them?
Yeah, absolutely. I 2024 especially, I think was a very, very kind of I made it a busy year for myself. I was very lucky to get to travel around the country a little bit to do quite a few different events. So let me think. I mean, so I was obviously did a few based in Manchester. I was down in London for the Mental Wealth Festival. That was absolutely beautiful. Did a few events over in Leeds. Went and did Out of Your Head in Newcastle. There was a couple of events in Nottingham and Sunderland. The 1261 Festival. I kind of led the kind of poetry day of that in Macclesfield. And what else? Allen Valley Folk Festival was another wonderful one. And this year there's been bits and pieces as well. I got to, as well as kind of the Verbose headline that just kind of happened this week. Yeah, there was a really wonderful opportunity to go to the kind of Wolverhampton Literature Festival with Written Off with my publisher, and do a bit of an event for kind of queer men's poetry, which was absolutely beautiful to be a part of. A lovely, lovely opportunity. So yeah, I've been in and out and around. It's been a busy old year of.
Yeah, you told me that before. Yeah, it's fair play to you when you're doing so much stuff like that. How have you found it when you went back down to London to do a reading then? So obviously I said London, I said, I know you said you talked about you were writing obviously when you lived in London, but like it was like, I don't know, so I'm originally from the Stretford area. And when
Mm,
Speakeasy first started going in Stretford, that was like I was going to my hometown and reading in my old
mm,
hometown. It's like it's just a very surreal experience. It must have been like that way for you in London when you did at that
mm.
festival.
No, absolutely. And I think to do it around kind of mental health related stuff as well was really interesting. Yeah, I my entire kind of public performance writing journey started when I had left home, when I was away from London and up in Manchester. And so to bring that back down now, and I've done it a few different times. Like I did the Mind Over Matter Slam. I went down to the final for that in London, which was absolutely wonderful. But you get these things where it's in a way quite freeing, I think. And it's like, I think I got quite lucky in certain ways that I came and started performing up in a city where I didn't really have any kind of like family or childhood friends or whatever. It just meant that like, and I love all of my family. I love my childhood friends, but it meant that you get to be a bit freer with it. There's no kind of self-consciousness that you might get if like, I don't know, if random people who saw you growing up are watching you do this kind of stuff. And so to bring that back down there and to go down and share that, now I find it really, really rewarding and lovely because it's like, it's something that I've invested a lot of myself into. It's something that I feel like Manchester has given me a lot of as well in terms of like my kind of my practice and my work. And so being able to go back down to my home, and there's pieces in my book that are about London, about kind of growing up at home. And so to be able to come back and kind of like and perform those and share those down there is it's a beautiful little full circle thing. And inevitably my mum comes and brings half of the Irish population of London to come and support as well. So there's always a good contingent there.
Oh, it must make life easy that straight away, and I agree with you completely, mate. Of it. Now, obviously, we've dropped a couple of hints already about your book, your
Mm.
debut collection. It came out 2 years ago now, and I didn't realize it had come out so long ago now. Actually, because it shows you time flies.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 years ago, it got people were obviously we're recording it in April 25, and your book came out through written off press back in April 23.
Yeah.
Obviously, tell us what we are. Now,
Yes.
I want you to tell us about the background of this book first of all.
Mm.
So take us back in
What
time, then.
So the background of this book was a bit of a wild one, really.
Mm.
I was at the point where it kind of the opportunity first came up. It was the founder of Written Off, Rebecca Kenny, was kind of going around Manchester and basically in a way that was like I think really quite kind of beautiful at the time that she was kind of starting up. Like often you find I think when you're performing and doing poetry in and around events, it's people I think quite often find that it's quite hard to kind of bridge the gap from that kind of those live performances and all of those things into more of a kind of published space, into journals or chat books or all that kind of stuff. And so I got approached by Rebecca off the back of some of the performances that she saw me do. And she basically asked me kind of like, have you been like, do you have a collection in you? Have you been writing bits of poetry? And obviously I've been writing poetry. I hadn't been angling it towards a collection at the time, but she asked, and obviously you look at the opportunity. I was like, yep, absolutely. Absolutely. I've been thinking about doing that. It'd be absolutely wonderful to take you up on that. But luckily I had all of this material. We had as well, because it was like a fairly long roster, I had some time to kind of like sculpt it and kind of curate it and get it all ready. But it's a really interesting one now because obviously it's 2 years on from publishing, but there's poetry in there that's probably at this point about 3 or 4 years old. Like some of it was real kind of like pandemic lockdown era poetry. In fact, there's a whole section of the book that's kind of dedicated towards that. And so yeah, it's a bit of a it's a lovely one to have, and I'm so kind of like I feel so fortunate to have had it. But I look at some of those poems now and I'm like, oh wow, this is back in the day work. This is
Yeah,
like
you
quite
do.
different from some of the new stuff now. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you do. As a natural progression of writers, frequently
Mm,
is like you can find that. I think you must be like yourself, where you look back at it thinking, I am a completely different writer in a
yeah.
couple of years to when that book was. Yeah, I've had it myself because when most of my work's been self-published, to be honest, yeah. But I've
Mm,
had a few bits out of publishers before now myself. So, but you find you dead right of it is it's really really fascinating because when my first and second book was, there was a 5 year gap between
mm,
the pair of them. And time the second book came out, 'cause I couldn't get it right. It was like I was a completely different writer. You
yeah.
do, and it's like
Yeah.
you're at that stage. So yeah, no, I agree completely with it. So it's insane. So no fair play to you, mate. So now, obviously, where did the title come from then? Tell us what we are.
So it was well, not to give too much away, but it's half of a line of one of the poems in the book. So it is a kind of I won't give away the conceit because part of the effect of the whole thing is that it's supposed to read the title and then read the poem and then it's supposed to do a whole little thing. But I picked out though that line in particular and those words because I like I said, I wrote a lot of this work and was kind of curating it at a time of the kind of COVID pandemic, which I mean is still ongoing, but we were really in the lockdowns at that point, so that was like a very kind of specific time in life. And I think it was just one where like at that point I was kind of in my mid 20s. I was like at a point where generally it's like it's quite a still a formative point I think in your life in your kind of your adult life to be going through that, and so it was a very kind of specific time. The situation that I was in lockdown was like ridiculous. We were in a flat that had to have its cladding replaced due to all of the kind of the output of all of the kind of the disaster at Grenfell. And so they were kind of replacing the cladding on the building. What that meant was that they basically boarded up our windows while they were replacing all of the cladding for a series of
Oh,
months. So we were
oh,
in this
good
like
grief!
lightless cave in the center of Manchester, in the completely silent city center, um, over that period. And yeah, it was a very, very odd one. But in that time, again, writing and like online events and the kind of the amount of kind of like standard like Manchester poetry events that moved into online spaces over that time, they provided a bit of a lifeline. Like the kind of regular monthly things like escape rules as well provided a bit of a lifeline, you know, those kind of like those daily poetry prompts across kind of the month of
Oh
April.
yeah,
And so a lot of it, honestly, a lot of the work and a lot of creativity came out of that. It was kind of sitting in that space and being like, there's nothing else I really can be doing, so let's write, let's get it all down on the page. And so tell us what we are in that context was thinking about like, well, everything's been thrown up in the air. I'm finding it quite hard to like, I'm reaching out for these connections and they all feel a little bit almost false in a way because they're all digital, and it's like I'm far away from my family, I'm far away from my friends. It's a very odd time, and it's like you can kind of lose a sense of yourself in that process. And so I think at the time that the work came out, Tell Us What We Are seemed like an apt title because it was thinking like, how do we find reflections in each other that we can build ourselves out of, if that makes sense.
yeah. No, I get completely. Maybe yeah, it was a horrible time for me as well because, like I said,
Yeah.
40. I told you off my I'm diabetic, and everyone knows it. Like it was
Mm.
as job I was working at the time sent me home 2 weeks. I always remember this. I'll tell you this true story. This they sent me
Mm.
home 2 weeks after it started and told us, ring us up, let us know once a week you're still alive, or get a laptop to your bench soon, and you can start working from home.
Oh
And
my
we're
god.
not furlonging you. But I couldn't leave the house for 6 months.
Oh my
And
god.
I know, and the best bit about it was, you think so, I couldn't leave the house, but I never got furlonged. So basically, I was sat here, unable to do any work, just podcasting all the time long, going crazy.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
No, that
it was crazy times. Yeah, absolutely.
absolutely wild. Absolutely wild.
And that's why. So yeah. So anyway, listen. Let's talk about more about you because I could talk with me all day long because I'm a very mellow twat. So, but anyway, right. Now obviously you've sent over a number of poems to me to be specific highlight on the podcast today. So, and I've not told you what I'm going to say about any of these. So we're going to just
Hmm.
go through them all. You tell us a bit about the background and I'll
Yeah,
say my
absolutely,
thoughts on
absolutely.
what I like with this. Now, the first one, and I'm going to probably get the pronunciation wrong with this. Is it Parasite? Have I got that right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, now I loved in this one the use of the rhythm on the remember on the first two stanzas.
Mm.
But then it got me because I've already sworn a minute ago, so we could swear again here now. Why on the sudden change, if people look at it on the third stanza, where you came up with crumple up and chuck the fucker.
Yeah.
Now, I want to learn about where this poem came from anyway. But what I am also interested in learning about is, before we do that, is where did the idea for the change in tempo come from on that third stanza? Because that's just it works really well, but it's a
Mm.
complete change in gears.
So I think it was looking back on this. It's definitely there's certain poems that I write from the perspective of kind of like visual form and the idea of like, or they're like to a very
Hmm.
very kind of like specific structure or something like that. If it's I don't know if it's you're dealing in like sonnets or like
Hmm.
ghazals or like villanelles or something like that. But this was very much I was writing a piece with the thought of how it was being spoken really and so I think really what that is often with my spoken pieces I think I'll have the kind of like the first stage of it, which is all of this kind of like this like verbal setup and like laying down ideas and putting in a bit of a thread of a story. And then you'll hit a point where I kind of just go into a gallop with it. And like I think that's what that third stanza is. It's me basically being like, right, I've set the scene. Here's what I think, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of that's what I think where that comes from.
Works really well. It works really well because sometimes it's
Oh,
always
thank you very
good
much.
if you can catch your audience out in your piece and you look at it. And I thought to myself, oh wow, that's a change in gear. But yeah, of course. So yeah, so it said that kind of makes sense to believe what you're saying there, but that's fine.
Mm.
So okay, feral paquet. Now obviously I know a paquet is like a little, it's like a budgie bird, a budgie garden, that or a little bird. So
Yes.
and I also know there's a reference to London in this piece. So obviously it's
Yes.
clearly something to do with the background. I
Yes.
really liked the last two lines in this piece as well. It
Oh,
was,
thank
I'm going to
you.
quote you here. So, was into the old English you rooting, and it will grow, and get us right now, and it will ever grow in ignorance of you. And I thought
Yes.
that's a great couplet at the end of that. So, tell us about this piece, and where did this one come from?
Absolutely. So parakeets are a bird that I always really associate with London. There are parakeets in Manchester, but where I was growing up in northwest London, there is a massive and ever kind of burgeoning population of parakeets. And there's some mythology about kind of where they all came from, because obviously they're not really a native English bird to begin with. But I really like the idea that I heard a story once that there's some stories that they like escape from a local zoo. Fair enough, that's probably the more realistic one. But I remember hearing a story that there was a film that was being filmed in a London river, basically, where they were trying to make it seem like it was somewhere more tropical. And so it was for the end establishing shot of the film, they released a whole flock of parakeets, and that became the seed of the population of parakeets in London. And so to me, yeah, parakeets have kind of always been like the look of them and the sound of them has always been something that I've associated with London and with home. And so I was really taken by this idea of this bird that had made London its home in the way that like so many kind of people and so many communities over like centuries have made London their home. But how there's certain ways in which when you are from a community that is not perceived to be kind of like traditionally English or traditionally British, that there's a level of uh, kind of changeability to the extent in which you're going to be kind of welcomed and to which you're going to get to kind of assimilate and feel part of it. And this is variable. This is like obviously very different depending on like what kind of identity or community that you're part of. But so with that, yeah, with that final line, I think I was just throughout the poem, I was really struck with this idea of you. There's so many people who are so fundamental to the UK as a nation and how we function and how we're able to like live and run and thrive and like just live our lives that contribute a lot to a society that ultimately in a lot of structural ways is quite kind of almost like pushes those people away almost. There's like it's like it comes up in so much of the kind of like anti-immigrant stuff that has always been a feature of politics in this country
Also,
that is like
yeah, it makes
so
sense.
bad at the minute.
I thought it was, yeah, because it
Yeah.
felt like there was an ignorance. They were being ignored, and I thought, yeah, I got there was a political dig at the end of that, and I thought, yeah,
Mm.
Very, very effective indeed. So,
Well, and it's much the sorry, and I'll just say very quickly, it's much the
mm,
same as the kind of parasitic piece before, where like that focuses in around the idea that like at the time, you remember during lockdowns, there was the whole kind of like clap for nurses and everyone like getting out on the street and doing all their like banging their pots and stuff like that, and all of that happening concurrently to like the Sun newspaper was then writing like at
oh,
certain points when it sorted them out, they were writing kind of like hit pieces about British nurses, and it was just this thing of being like this hostility towards people who are really like keeping the country going is something that I was feeling very strongly at the time I was writing those pieces. So
yeah, no, that's fair play to you. Fair play to you completely with that. So, yeah, I know there's plenty I can say about that, but that government aren't in power anymore. So,
mm,
let's hope the current government, the new one, learns from their mistakes. That's a good way of putting it in it, really. So, but
yeah,
yeah, well, move on. Okay, 5th for the 6th, 22. Now,
yes,
obviously, there's a significance between the date on this, but you'll tell us about this in a minute.
yeah,
But I really liked the use of "I wonder" two thirds of
mm,
the way into the poem because
mm,
it's you turned the whole poem on its head by doing that. You could change the perspective, and I thought that's clever writing indeed. So
mm.
tell us about why you did it that way, and then what the significance of the title is.
Yes. I think I landed on that. I wonder. Well, to give a little bit of a context about the piece, this is a piece that's about kind of grief and loss. So there is a section of the chapbook that is focused around kind of like, well, different people that I've kind of lost in my life. This piece in particular
Hmm.
was about my father, who unfortunately passed away in 2022. Whose name was
Ah,
William Clifford. And so where this piece came from. Was it was a very very strange kind of moment, and I remember it very very clearly that sometimes with pieces of poetry I find that it's like you're almost like building like a brick wall. It's like a very slow process of kind of like I set some bricks, I lay a foundation, and then I go away, and then I come back and I do some more and do some more bits and tweak it, and maybe it needs kind of leveling and like shifting into place and all this kind of stuff. This piece came out pretty much exactly as it is now in the book in one
oh,
sitting.
it does
And it
happen that, yeah.
was me. This was days after my dad had left us, had passed away, and in the middle of all of it, like it's like nothing else I've ever experienced in my life, and it threw all of the usual rhythms of life entirely out of whack. And so where this piece happened was much as it describes throughout. It was me going out into my parents' garden and sitting in the summer sunshine down in London, and just feeling as I still do sometimes, but felt really strongly at that point, just feeling like I was going to turn around and see my dad still somewhere, that I was like that he was somehow still around me, and sitting in this garden that he and my mum had like grown and built and shaped and put together. It all just kind of tumbled out. But that I wonder line was really, it was me sitting in that garden and basically just being unbelievably overwhelmed, I think is the best way to describe it, by everything that was going on at that time. And in that way, almost just like not putting any kind of like filter, or not putting any kind of like over analysis on what was going on, just almost like letting everything sensorially in the world kind of come in and hit me all in one go. And that's what that line really captures, I think.
Yeah, I think poetry sometimes it's you don't you shouldn't be always trying to overwrite work. Sometimes, like you've done this piece, and I was wondering if this was quickly wrote piece actually, because it's like
Mm,
sometimes you just let it all out, and you look at it
mm,
after you're thinking, oh, that's done. But other times,
yeah.
and I'm going to swear again here because it's the third time now, but it's my fault this time, this one again, this time. But sometimes you can really fuck around with a poem and it could take
Yeah.
you. And you must have had examples pop in this collection as well, where you could be sat
Mm,
messing around with someone for 2, 3 years and you can't get it right.
mm. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And it's, I think there's something to, again, it was a time where like so much was like thrown up in the air in my life, and I think sometimes we go into poems with a intent to do one thing, but very quickly start to try and do multiple things with what we're doing within our verses and our lines and whatever like that. And that was a real example to me of just like I was feeling one massive overturing feeling of grief in all of its different kind of piccolos and forms, and just that was quite a pure stream. And so I think in that way it made actually the writing of the piece quite easy in a sense and quite like therapeutic as well. I think it was, again, I often talk about poetry as being something that has allowed me to focus on and express things that I don't think I'd ever have an opportunity to otherwise. And it was a very, very key moment for that, I think, then. So
Yeah, no, it's fair play. No, fair play to you straight away with that one, mate. So, okay, now I was caught out with the next piece actually because I wasn't expecting you to do a haiku actually in the book. Actually, that one caught me out because I've done a
mm,
couple of I've done a couple of books of haikus, and
mm,
I could probably ask you a full podcast talking about haikus if you had, because obviously like, and that piece in question is here's what I remember. Now,
mm.
with the art of doing a haiku is, and it's this said to me straight away. It's you've obviously this isn't your first rodeo with these, I suspected. So tell us about how you love a haikus and or hatred, maybe.
No, I'm really fascinated by haikus as a form. I think because it's really strange. I remember once seeing someone do a performance of just like machine gunning out these like
Oh,
these comedic haikus that
oh,
was like unbelievable, was like really, really impressive. But I find it really interesting where it's like it's a poetic form obviously that isn't based in English, but it's something that like English poetry has often delved into. And I think just everything about the structure, not only the kind of like the 575 of it all, but also the kind of the format of at least the format as I understand it of kind of classical haikus, where there's you kind of set a first line that kind of establishes a scene, a second line that elaborates on that scene, and then a third line that kind of twists that or turns it on its head. And so you often have the word of action in the third line that kind of fundamentally changes something about what's going on and like adds an element of movement. And to me, that was the line cutting at the end, cutting morning songs, to yeah, kind of just I think denote that moment of stillness. And again, all of this was also a poem that was in the kind of the more kind of grief related segment of the
yeah,
collection, and
I
it's
get
just
that.
around that kind of yeah that idea of when you're in those moments of grief, it can seem like the entire world is expressing it with you. And so I wanted to kind of build in that idea of it, that even the bird song was kind of an expression of that, if that makes sense.
Also, yeah, did you find then obviously with this one then, like with obviously 05, 06, 222, did this
Mm.
one come out almost the way it was, or did you have to really fiddle around with it?
There was a well, weirdly, the only bit of fiddling I really did was the very final line has cutting morning songs, and there is a you could write morning either as morning the daytime or morning as in morning in terms of grief. And I landed on doing morning in terms of grief, but in the writing of this chapbook and putting it all together, that word probably changed back and forth about half a dozen times. Um, but
Oh no,
apart
you
but
poor
apart
man.
from that, no, it very much kind of like it just kind of came out as was. I think again, it's like one of the really nice things about haikus is that if you can express something in a like really neat and clean way, when you get it down like that, it almost just sits there perfectly. It's kind of like you don't need to do too much more to kind of finesse it necessarily. And so yeah, I'd say that was another one that came about pretty quickly.
Yeah,
Although with
no.
obviously the agonizing that poets do afterwards
Oh
always
yeah,
as
well.
part of
Yeah, recovery. The next one, obviously, the
it.
fourth piece, and this obviously, I knew this was obviously going to link on, moving on from the previous two, so it felt like it was carrying that on really.
Mm,
And I like this because it was, and I took another change in gears because it was
mm,
obviously it's a poem of two halves, with a second half that doesn't really say very much, just one line
mm,
in italics at the end,
mm,
which people will look at it and say, "Oh, to be drunk again."
mm,
Now, obviously you've pretty well told us what this piece is about anyway,
mm.
but where did the idea come from to do the refrain in italics at the end of it?
I think there was the idea. So the first kind of stanza of this poem really I think it's almost like it's capturing two different streams of thought going on in one in my mind, basically,
Mm,
where one of them is very kind of like the first stanza I'd say is quite analytical, it's quite kind of it's quite narrative, it's kind of setting a scene more, it's setting out and laying the idea of like there is this person that I have a memory of that I want to be able to get back to. and it feels like it would almost be a luxurious thing, where once it was like so easy to access that person, and to like be around them, that suddenly they're gone. And so there's the idea of like that rarity of it, and being able to go back, and even if I wasn't able to submerse myself in their presence again, being able to kind of like get just a little bit of it, and so treat it more like it's a fine wine. And I think it's really that kind of, there's a relationship between the final two lines of the poem, in that kind of the penultimate line is like, to be sipped and savored like a fine wine, which is obviously a very kind of like, it comes across quite like, I don't know, a posh way of enjoying a drink. In a way, it's like you're not drinking to get drunk, you're drinking to savor the taste of all of it. And then that final note is just to be like, it's the first stanza is, here is what I want now, but in reality, the true thing that I want is to be submersed in that person's presence, is to be drunk again, to be drunk on them. So,
Yeah.
but I have a real kind of soft spot for this poem, because to me, it's kind of, it came out of a couple of different places, and one of them was, again, it was a person that I had a memory of in my life who was a person that I knew, but part of it was also to do with like myself and like a sense of my former self. And it's really, I've had some really really lovely comments from people who, because there is such a like, there's a thread about in it that is purely about kind of like the idea of alcohol and drunkenness, and I've had some really lovely notes from some people who do maybe have kind of like a bit of a storied relationship with alcohol as a result of it. So I'm kind of, I am quite happy with that piece, and that I think it kind of, it keys into a few different things, and so kind of, yeah, remains a pretty important one to me.
Yeah, no, sure. Sometimes I think sometimes the poems, sometimes they don't have to go on 40 lines. A good
Mm.
haiku can say as much as a 40-line poem in 3 lines. Yeah, I agree with you.
Mm.
You can tell it, man. I knew straight away. It felt an important piece, that one, to me straight away. Then,
Mm.
yes, both those two did. Okay, the last poem I want to talk about here is,
Mm.
and this is the one that really I felt this is really quite a good Tennyson-ish. This piece is actually with the use of the
Oh,
colours.
bless you.
Actually, oh, I told you already. I love Tennyson. I love crossing the bars. One of my favourite all-time classic poems.
Mm.
This isn't like that. We need to stay still before we carry on. But yeah, I do. I love this one. I like the use of the colours in it. Obviously, blue or pale pink to fade in purple.
Mm.
And I liked the last stanza was an interesting choice in perspective as well. We started the last 3 lines off with and, as, and again. And to
Mm.
do that, I think it can be a logistic nightmare if you're trying to
Mm.
read the poem out or read it on a page sometimes. But
Yeah.
it felt planned straight away. So, what's the story behind this poem then?
So this poem, well, it was one that I kind of had written up and had in a bit of a draft. But there was a real kind of focus and a bit of editing around it that I ended up doing, that was based on, so there was a call out that a kind of an event, and I suppose a bit of a kind of organization and collective called Sayin in Manchester was doing years ago, where again during the lockdowns for National Poetry Day, they managed to get hold of a few, what were they, like A1 sized kind of like billboard spaces in around the center of the city. And so they did a call out, say, for National Poetry Day, send us your poems, and like if it's one that we figure is like good enough, then we'll put it up in Northern Quarter, and people can kind of walk past and see it, which was really wonderful. And so I saw that call out and thought, what kind of piece would work in that context? Like, so often we think of the context of poetry being like, either we are in person kind of performing it to an audience that we can see, or it's something that's sitting in like a book or an article or a zine or something like that someone's picking up in a little space. And I thought, what is a poem that I can write that will fit the context of a poster board that people are walking past in the center of town? And what's going to be going on around that space? What are people going to be keyed into? How is
Hmm.
this poem going to meet people as they're going through their day? And the obvious things to me seem to be like, well, let me reflect it back on you. Like, how does the sky look as you find this poem? Like, what is the thing that you're looking at? Because I'll tell you what I'm looking at, and then maybe if we can share a moment over that through the bridge of this poem, then through that we can be close to one another. And that to me is ultimately like, it's the thing that it's what I always use poetry as a tool for, is that I want it to be that bridge. Poems to me are kind of, it's you saying, here is a part of myself that I want to hold up to you. Do you see your reflection in it? And that poem felt like a really kind of clear articulation of that to me. So yeah, that was kind of the origin.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, good stuff, mate. Good stuff. Now, that's all that I've got to ask you in the book today. And obviously, we're going to do a
Mm.
couple of wrap-up questions to wrap up with next. And like I said 40, I always like to ask, what plans do you have next? There's, like I
Mm.
said before, we've dropped a hint already for eagle-eyed listeners of something we said before, which we're not going to go into details on. Maybe next time you come on, John, with that one, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But what else you got planned for the future, mate? I know you're in a quiet month when this podcast comes out, but you're
Yeah.
busy, aren't you? Beyond that, certainly.
Bits and pieces, definitely, yes. So I had a very busy February of jumping around doing lots of events and managed to modulate it a little bit for March. And now I'm taking a rest in April because it's my birthday month. So I'm going to chill out and just enjoy my birthday a bit. But there's bits on the horizon. There'll undoubtedly be more to fill out as time goes on. But we've got, I think, Wednesday, 28th of May, I'm overdoing Poets Palace, which is a relatively new event to Manchester. They've hosted them down south a bit, but it's come north more recently. It's a wonderful event that's kind of hosted by Biz Bond. So I'll be going and doing a headline slot at that, which I'm very much looking forward to. And then further out, all the way in June, June 22nd, I have the honor of being part of the contestants for Slam Chester, which is a new Manchester slam poetry event that Kieran King has put on. So very, very excited for that. Those are probably the two big ones that are coming up in the near future.
Have you done this slams before?
So yes, I did. I'm not a very kind of storied slam poet. It's not. I know loads of people who came into poetry through kind of slam and like say like uni slam. I know is a big gateway for like a lot of young poets into performance spaces around the country. But I've never really done it. It's just not the route I've come in. The only real slam that I've done before was the Mind Over Matter slam. So they did a national slam competition that kind of went around the country. I was lucky enough to be one of the poets who kind of won through for the Manchester heat of that, and so went to the final down in London. But I've not really done it apart from that, so I'm kind of like I'm still feeling it out. I'm still working out what kind of works in terms of a slam poem. It's a bit of a kind of
Yeah.
discovery piece for me.
Oh, good luck then, Mum. I've done it,
Oh,
what,
thank you so much.
done it three times actually, and I won two of
Mm.
them. But I'm not going to do it again. It's too stressful. And I was like I said, I don't want to do it again, to put it bluntly.
It's stressful, isn't it? It is
Yeah.
stressful, yeah.
You
But I
find
mean,
I did one, or I went down to watch one in Wigan, and I'm not saying who did it. And what they did was they had people competing on stage in pairs. So you were stood next to the person that was doing it, and
oh my
they were,
god,
and I thought to myself, oh, I couldn't have done that. But
yeah.
like, then you go into it, and the first one I won was a very, very drunk audience, and it was like, and you're sat there thinking, half two-thirds of his audience are off their heads. I've got entertaining my thoughtful
Yeah,
material. I thought, oh my good grief.
yeah.
No.
I've just realized as well, actually, I tell a slight fib there, and that I don't really, I kind of don't really count this one because I was more just there for the vibes of it. But
Mm,
I, a couple of years ago, was lucky enough to get to go over to New York just on a bit of a holiday. Again, this was a bit
mm.
kind of the aftermath of my dad, and I wanted to take a big kind of big trip and just kind of like clear my mind a bit. And so I went over to the US and was in New York, and went to the New Eurekan Poets Cafe does kind of, I think they just do kind of like weekly like public slams, and so I basically just jumped into that to see what New York poetry would be like, and so I had a bit of fun doing that. Obviously didn't kind of win or didn't really kind of like properly compete in it, but I only bring it up because I just remember it was the best landing into US poetry that I think I could have asked for, where like
Oh,
I
wow.
sat down to like watch it, and it was a bunch of people from like Brooklyn and Manhattan all doing their poems, and then there's one guy who like sounded like he must have been from like the deep south, like Louisiana or something like that, who walked up to the mic, and I think his first line was something like and they say man never really tamed the buffalo, and I was like, this is perfect, this is exactly
Oh,
what I want from like US poets. This is so
wow.
yeah, that was my first little dip my toes into it.
Oh, fantastic. When you get back to America again, let me know how it goes, definitely. Because I've had some of our fellow Americans on there before now, and it's like when you're in different areas listening to stuff. It's
Mhm.
different country. I've done it, and I've done toured Ireland twice, Southern and Northern Ireland, and
Mm.
it's like it's different everywhere you go, and it's just a fantastic experience. I recommend it, John Chen, as you would
Yeah,
say yourself, just go and step out your comfort zone. Even if you hated the
absolutely.
experience and never want to do it again, at least you can say you've been there, haven't you? So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
And I think it's a bit of a fun conceit as well. It's like I don't know that like slam will ever be my kind of my fundamental way of like sharing my work or anything like that. But I think it's a really kind of like it is a fun structure in a way, and it kind of like gets at least when you're doing a slam that like people are going to be fairly like keyed into what's going on stage, and like it's got like I suppose while it is stressful, it's got a bit of a different kind of like a heightened energy around it. So yeah, it's a fun one. It is a fun one.
Yeah, no, definitely recommend it. So, okay, mate. I'll say hard sell time now. Where can people get hold of your collection?
Yes, tell us what we are. So, the best place to buy it that will benefit me the most would be to go through the Written Off Publishing website. You can go through that, and you can find my book alongside plenty of others by wonderful, wonderful writers. And the reason I say that's the best way to do it is that it is also available through kind of like Waterstones online and through a few different independent bookshops around the country, but obviously all of those will kind of will take a little chunk of commission as part of kind of like stocking the book and stuff like that. So if you order it online, that's the way that you'll be supporting the artist the most.
Fair point.
But so that's a good place to get the book from. You can either Google it and find it online, or if you follow any of my socials. So my Instagram is JC Poetry. That's JAYCEE and then the word poetry. Then I have a link to it on there as well. So
Perfect.
ways to find it.
Perfect. Is there any other social media links you want people to be aware of before we wrap up?
I'd say really that's the main one. My Instagram at the moment is my main kind of public outlet for kind of dates that I'm doing or events or things like that. So again, that's at JC Poetry. Alongside that, I do have a website that will pop up if you Google John Clifford Poetry. That is do a refresh this year. So you can go, and if you want to be a person who can go in and say, oh, I saw John's poetry website back when it looked crap, then absolutely by all means do so, and you'll find some old poems of mine on there. But yeah, I'd say the Instagram is probably the main one for the minute.
Yeah, no, fair play, mate. Fair play. Right, guys and girls, yes, we're going to take a quick break for two shakes of the dice now. And when John comes back, he's going to do a couple of pieces for us. So it's been a pleasure, mate. We've chatted for ages here as well. I'm going to shock you in a minute when you see how long we've been talking for, because I keep a counter on this. So, thank you again, mate. We shall be back in
Thank
two
you so much.
shakes of the dice.